Hi, this is Daniela Wolf with Bestie Life, the podcast, and this is your community to support you through the little and not so little events that make up your day-to-day life. From the I've got this moments to the I just can't moments. We are here to empower all women to find and develop the skills they need to find peace, balance, and the bliss in their busy. Through solo episodes as well as interviews with amazing women who share their journey and their story and how it works for you. I hope you find the inspirations to make you laugh, think, as well as maybe rethink what you thought you knew, and connect as we realize that we are all living similar ups and downs and don't have to do it alone. So excited for you to hear this episode, and thanks so much for joining me today. Hi, this is Daniela with Bestie Life, the podcast, and today I am so excited for you to meet Tracy Lorenzo. She is a certified women's empowerment and ADHD coach. So her women's empowerment side is called Elevare Women, and then you can find her as an ADHD coach at coachtracie.com. She is a successful entrepreneur and professional with ADHD herself, having spent most of her life immersed in multiple projects at the same time, a gift only those with ADHD could really, truly appreciate. And so she is committed to empowering women from where they're at in their life journey, as well as helping entrepreneurs and professionals manage their ADHD challenges that are negatively impacting their work and home life, and find and uncover and leverage really those unique ADHD strengths so you can soar in your job and business. So thank you so much, Tracy, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And I know I didn't even scratch the surface of what your journey has been and all the amazing things that you are doing. So if you can kind of back up for us and share kind of what your journey has been like as an entrepreneur, as someone with ADHD, and how you help people in so many different ways.
Sure. My life is pretty interesting, I think. I used to be a newspaper journalist and editor, and I had a column. So I was kind of visible in the community. And from there, I also was a real estate agent. I still am. We had apartment buildings and a big office building, and I was the deputy county clerk. So I've had all of these like careers, not just jobs. These were all careers. And, in the mix, I had 2 children and divorce, which kind of flipped my world upside down. And that was kind of what set me on my path to uncovering my ADHD. So my journey's been pretty wild, a pretty wild roller coaster ride. But
Yeah. So what led you to then doing the coaching part and really focusing on that ADHD piece?
So that's a really great question. I have been working with women, empowering women, pretty much my entire career. When I was a journalist and then an editor, one of the women that came to work for me, when I decided that I was going to be leaving, I actually went to my boss a year before I was ready to leave. And I said, I'm going to be transitioning out and I want to train this person to take my spot. So I've been kind of doing that my entire life, is, empowering women, trying to help women grow. And over the last 10 years or so, I've been trying to figure out how to manage my own ADHD, which is really interesting because what a lot of people don't really understand about ADHD is, for a lot of us, we're masking. So if anybody talked to me maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, they would never have, I imagine they would have never suspected that I had ADHD because I was working, I was busy, I was doing things. And the problem was that when it got to the point where I wasn't able to manage because my emotional state also took over. So that's something that people with ADHD, when they have emotional turmoil, when something happens, and if they've been masking, if they've been managing to hold all of those balls in the air, something emotional happens to rock their world, and those balls come crashing down. And
Yeah.
that's what happened to me. And the balls came crashing down, and I didn't know how, I didn't know how to put things back together, and I didn't know why. Now, I
Mhm.
always knew that there was something different, that, there were things that everybody else did that I couldn't seem to do. But I really didn't put the pieces together as to what it was until much later in life, when my life became unmanageable.
Yeah. And I think so many times we're taught one way to manage things and not realizing, I think when we have ADHD, when we're diagnosed with that, there's a different way to approach tasks. There's a different kind of flow where you find more success probably than somebody who can just kind of set a schedule and stick to it in a certain way and that type of thing, right?
Right, absolutely. And one of the interesting things about ADHD is that it manifests differently in different people. So, for instance, my son was diagnosed when he was 10. And I knew from when he was 9 months old, climbing out of his crib, that he had ADHD. I mean, you could just see it. He was the stereotypical hyperactive boy.
Mhm.
Um, but I kind of fought that until finally a teacher said, kids this age, they kind of know when other kids are different. And have you ever thought about having him tested? So I begrudgingly had him tested back then, but still never recognized it in myself.
Mhm.
And then I had my daughter, who was completely different. She wasn't overly hyperactive, but she was super talkative. Well, a lot of kids are talkative. And
Right.
that's the thing. When we talk about ADHD, there are a lot of symptoms or traits that a lot of people have. So we don't necessarily want to just say, oh, well, that person talks a lot. They probably have ADHD, because it's really a combination of a lot of things.
Mhm.
So I didn't recognize it in my daughter, and I didn't recognize it in myself until much later. So then I got diagnosed, and it wasn't for another, I don't know, 5, 8 years that my daughter then got diagnosed. And when we started putting the pieces together, realizing that, ADHD does show up in people differently. But the underlying issues are really that our brain doesn't process things the way other people's brains do. So just like you said, where one person can have a schedule, somebody with ADHD, we can have a schedule, but we might have to have a lot of the minute details on that schedule. So for instance, we might need to not just say, I'm going to schedule a time to do the laundry. Most people don't schedule a time to do the laundry, first of all. But someone with ADHD might not only have to schedule a time to do the laundry, but we have to schedule it in different chunks. I have to schedule a time to put it in the washer. Then I have to schedule a time an hour later to put it in the dryer. And then I have to schedule a time an hour after that to fold it or put it away.
Right.
So we use schedules and things differently. We process a lot of things differently.
Right. But like you said, I think being able to find those strengths and leverage those can take this and turn it into your superpower.
Absolutely. And that's such a big thing. And part of what I do with the coaching is there are so many women that get bogged down, and they are depressed because all of their balls have dropped, and they can't seem to pick them up, and they can't get out of their own way because it's a vicious cycle. Especially, anybody knows, if you're depressed, you're unmotivated. But when you have ADHD, it kind of everything is compounded. It's already difficult to do things. Now you add depression and things onto that, and that's why, so many people are have multiple diagnoses. They might also have depression and anxiety and things like that. But when you layer all of those things, then it's so hard to see your superpower. So what I try to do with my clients is, let's first try to manage the traits that are giving you trouble. What are your biggest challenges? Let's work on that. And then I work beyond that to kind of clear the fog, so
Mhm.
that once they are able to manage things a little bit better, then we can start to uncover what are their superpowers. Because I absolutely believe that ADHD inherently comes with superpowers. It is what it is. I mean, we hyper focus. We can do somebody with ADHD can stuff so many things into a short span of time. We can get six things done in the time it takes somebody else to do one. Because
Right.
we procrastinated and now we only have an hour and we managed to fit it in. So it's really discovering what those superpowers are and leveraging those
Yeah.
to, yeah, to manage our life.
And like you said, I think when people kind of put off doing, finding out their diagnosis, finding out if they're just overwhelmed with too many things on their plate, or if it really is ADHD, will change the direction of how you set yourself up for success, as well as then being able to give yourself the grace when you're maybe not as motivated or you are procrastinating, to not beat yourself up about it, because I think that can only then kind of continue that cycle of feeling bad about yourself and those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if we grew up with ADHD, which, ADHD is not adult onset, ADHD you're born with. So for most of us, we grew up with it, and in one way or another, we were probably ridiculed. Maybe we were messy. We had, bad handwriting. We were forgetting our homework. We weren't doing our homework. Maybe we were too talkative in class. We were the class clown. All of those things created the what later in life we felt the shame and guilt over. And so it's really important that we get a proper diagnosis to figure out, is it ADHD? But really, with a proper diagnosis, what happens with most people is they get a diagnosis and medication, and they're not necessarily given the tools to learn how to live, how to manage their life, because
Right.
medicine isn't going to help you manage your life.
Mm-hmm. And especially as you get older, you're managing other people's lives, you're managing a job. There's so many more things on your plate, and to be able to still be kind of focused when you need to be, give yourself the grace when you're not as focused, and see that, through your own example, you can still be incredibly successful in multiple areas, and be able to leverage that and use that to your benefit.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that especially women too, we tend to have a lot of things on our plate. We are the caretakers. You're expected to have your kids show up at school, being dressed in clean pressed clothes, or, have their
Know
lunch.
when it's pajama day and
Right,
remember
yes.
that too.
Exactly. Know that it's pajama day. Know that the project was due. Moms are supposed to hold it all together. And when we're having trouble holding our own stuff together, usually that's when it shows up. When you realize I'm not, now I'm letting my children down. And that was really the critical moment for me, was when I was really letting my children down. And at this point, they're in college.
Mhm.
And I had my daughter had to have her FAFSA done. She was doing work study. She was working in an admin building at the college. She loved her job, and I didn't get the FAFSA done, and they had to let her go. And that was a critical moment for me, where I just felt like I let her down. I was letting my son down, and I was like, I have got to get a handle on whatever this is. And
Right.
that's how I kind of discovered it was ADHD.
Yeah. And it sounds like, definitely, regardless of where it's showing up in your life, one of the things that you said, kind of being able to have an awareness of what needs to get done and allotting time for those things to get done, even if it's three things at one time, because that's when you're most productive, or being able to keep track of stuff is probably one of, if someone was listening right now and thinking, gosh, I wonder if that's something I need help with, that would be one of the areas you'd start them with, or where
Yeah,
would?
that's definitely an area. There are a lot of areas that sometimes come into play. And usually when people are coming to see me, it's because they're just, they're not being productive, and they're missing things. They're missing out on promotions. They're missing out on opportunities. But with that also comes the depression and things like that. So I have to be, as a coach, I have to be very cognizant that I'm not delving into the world of therapy.
Mhm.
So I will work on the skill building. And if there is an issue with things like depression, anxiety, those things I refer out to a therapist. And I work on, but I do work on things like the negative thought patterns and the things that the illogical and irrational thought patterns and flipping the script on those. So I do a little bit of all of that. And then I also do NLP, so neuro linguistic programming. So once we've kind of worked on the skills, and we've kind of worked on the thoughts and the behaviors, then I kind of move on to neuro-linguistic programming to kind of solidify those the tools and the behaviors and kind of make them all. It's a layered approach. So
Right. Okay. And then to lead into the Elevator Women program, so the empowerment group, tell us a little bit more about that.
So Elevator Women is the tagline is where women come to grow, and basically it is women helping women. So there are other female coaches that are on. I have a Facebook page, and I feature other coaches, and it's a hub for women to come to if they're struggling in a certain area. Maybe they can find a coach that's going to help them. So my focus is ADHD, and helping, particularly women. I do help other people, but predominantly it's for women struggling with ADHD.
I love that. So it's like whether they have ADHD or not, you're still going to have that resource available to help empower them, to help them with that area that is kind of tripping them up. When I talk about self-care, there's always, sometimes we can have certain areas of our lives together and then others that we might need a little bit of extra support in. And I think being able to find that in different ways without judgment and all those kind of things is where we all get stronger together.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And I always say in my Facebook group, it's a no judgment zone. This is, we're all here to learn and grow. So there's no judgment in that.
Yeah. So in addition to kind of scheduling even what seems like, day-to-day stuff, whether it's laundry, different pieces, what are some of the strategies that you found have really helped you as well?
Probably one of the biggest that have helped me is meditation. And I preach this, and it's very difficult for people with ADHD to get into meditation. I know it was very difficult for me. But it's also has been so instrumental because when I meditate, I'm able to quiet the chaos in my head, and it helps me put my thoughts into order. So I strongly recommend that my clients work on meditation, and I have some meditations that I recommend. I don't do my own meditations, but I've found some that have been very useful to me. And starting out slow, start out with just 6 minutes, 6 minute relaxation meditation. But that has been absolutely huge in my life.
In addition to some of the short ones, I've even found just finding different types of meditation. There's walking, people assume I think you have to be sitting cross-legged on a pillow, with your hands in a certain pose, just kind of oming and breathing. And I think, meditation can be walking and listening to certain things. It could be just a mindful moment. Meditation can come in different forms. I know there's transcendental meditation, there's all sorts of different kinds. So probably, like you said, just like every person's ADHD is different, everyone's therapy as far as meditation and what's the word I want to kind of strategies that help them are all going to look a little bit different.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why I work with clients one on one, because what might work for one person might not work for another person. And one of the things with ADHD is if a strategy doesn't work, we tend to want to just throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's like, oh, I can't do this. This isn't going to work. So I work really intensely with my clients for the first 6 weeks. And I just say, look, let's try this. Let's try this strategy. Let's see if this works. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to be checking in with you every couple days, or you're going to check in with me and let me know, and we'll tweak it. We'll find what works for you. So, yeah, definitely meditation is one of those things that and like you said, the longer ones, I started out with a 6 minute, and now I'll do 35, 40 minutes or longer. And I get kind of bummed when it's over. I'm like, oh, I want to go a little longer. But it's just been, I just can't say enough about meditation. It's been absolutely huge for me.
Yeah, and it's one of those things we have to practice. That's why they're called a practice, because like you said, for the first 6 minutes, you might be like, oh my God, my brain was everywhere,
Yes.
and even when that happens, to give yourself the grace to kind of, they say, like, follow your thought, recognize it, and then come back, and the more you kind of practice doing that, the quicker it is to come back, the easier it is to get into that state. And so definitely to give yourself the grace and time of that practice to get better at it. I think a lot of times we just assume we're going to be good at things the first time we do it. And, in general, I think when we're all over the place, it can be hard to have that focus.
Right, absolutely. And I'm glad you said that about the grace because with ADHD, that is also so huge that we have to learn to give ourselves grace because as much as I work on strategies to minimize the challenges, um, I we have to recognize that ADHD is a trait.
Mhm.
So we will minimize it, but there will be things that will still pop up. And I kind of laugh when I do live presentations in my Facebook group. And my ADHD, there are days that it shines through. And you know what? I embrace it. It's part of who I am. And the thing is, as long as I am able to minimize the challenges so that I am being productive and I'm feeling pretty good about myself. I don't sweat the small stuff. I don't, I've learned to give myself grace and be like, okay, yeah, I probably shouldn't have said that. And we kind of joke. Sometimes I'll be like, oh yeah, that just came right out of my mouth. Because that's the impulsivity.
Yep.
Sometimes things come out and you go, whoa, yeah, maybe I should have thought about that for an extra second.
Allowing ourselves the grace to be who we are and not always beat ourselves up about it is part of the journey when it comes to just appreciating who we are and embracing all of it, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Gratitude, because I know we talked about grace. Gratitude is another area that I think doesn't always get taken into account, especially when we think of ADHD. We always look at it from the negative standpoint of something wrong, something different. But what would you say are the things you're most grateful for, especially in relationship to your ADHD?
Gratitude is absolutely huge in learning to live with and manage and embrace ADHD and leverage the superpowers. So, we can, of course, people with ADHD, we could beat ourselves up over all of those things. When they do a diagnosis, there's 3 pages worth of, do you do this wrong? Do you do that wrong? Do you do this wrong? But they fail to list the 3 pages of things that we do amazingly well. So with gratitude, I am very grateful that I can get a lot of things done in a short amount of time. I am extremely grateful that I'm an amazing problem solver. I joke that just give me some duct tape and I can even fix a sentence with it. So there are just certain things that I do really, really well that I recognize are part of my ADHD and just part of who I am. But gratitude, it has to be a huge part of the journey for anyone with ADHD, really embracing what do you do well and really thinking about it. I mean, we can't be grateful for things unless we quiet our minds enough to look for it. And, people are going to be quick to point out the things that we do wrong and less quick to point out the things that we're doing well. So we have to do that for ourselves.
Absolutely. So where can people find you, Tracy? How can they work you, whether as an empowerment coach or as an ADHD coach?
Just go to coachtracie.com and it's Tracie, Tracie.
Mhm.
If they go to coachtracie.com, I have a contact form there. You can find me on Facebook at Elevare Women. If you just, it's Elevare, ELEV as in Victor, ARE, Women. Um, and there's also elevarewomen.com. They could check that out. Or they can send me an email at Tracie at elevarewomen.com. And again, it's Tracie with an IE.
Awesome. So all those links will be live in the show notes below. So thank you so much, Tracy, for all of that. Because like I said, I think a lot of times, it either gets passed over when we're younger or we just assume we have a lot on our plate and we beat ourselves up over it. And I think being able to recognize, that having ADHD, possibly having ADHD and exploring that option can lead us to more strengths and more success rather than trying to minimize and ignore it.
Yep, absolutely. Well said.
Well, thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks so much again for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please let me know any questions or comments that you have. Also, if you can please leave an Apple 5-star review so that this episode can be shared with more women. There's 2 quotes that I love. Alone we may be strong, but together we are stronger, as well as when women support each other, incredible things happen. So let's be stronger and incredible together, as well as maybe just have some fun along the way. Thanks so much and talk to you soon. Bye.